Hi, my name is Solomon. You're welcome to this class again. Our previous class we talked about data type, so we are continuing the class today. We spoke about numbers as our data type. We also talked about string. Today's class we shall be dealing with list. What is a list? That's what we shall be talking about today. And how do you assess the element of a list? A list is a combination or collections of different items. So how do you assess those items or those particular values inside a list? So the next one we shall be talking about is how do you slice a list? Like you want to get a chunk of or a certain section of that list. So how do you get them out? Maybe you want to deal with the first to the middle section or the first five items of a list. How do you get it? So we'll talk about that. And the last one is the length of the list. How do you get the total items? You want to just know the number of items inside the list. So that's what we shall be looking at in this class. So please do stay tuned to this channel to the end. The video to the end. Then I'll show you how to do that. I'll explain it, and then I'll show you the practical aspect of this list. So thank you once again. Now, when we say list, what is a list in Python? We're going to talk about list in Python, and we're going to say look at what is a list. How can we assess the element of a list? How can we slice a list? And how to find the length of a list. So these are the things we shall be talking about in this class. So let's move straight to the meaning of list. Now, what is a list in Python? Now, a list in Python is a collection of multiple elements or items stored in a single variable. For instance, I have situations like fruit. Fruit, as you know, there are in this case now there are about 6 items or elements inside fruit. So I group them together. They are collections, or we can say arrays. In other programming language we call them arrays, but in Python we call them fruit. So everything about fruit now, for instance, I store how many items? There are about 6 items or 6 elements inside that array, and I store it into a variable called fruit. I can represent it by X, I can represent it by Y, but I represent it by fruit in this case. So this arrangement is called list, and you can see the bracket here. Please take note of the bracket. To group this element together, use this square bracket. I call it square bracket. Please take note of that. So for instance, we have other examples like odd numbers like 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, like that. So this is an example of list. Take note of that if it's an alphabetical characters, you can put quotation mark. It might be single quote or double quote, but it's a number, so don't put it in quote. I think I explained that in my previous class, string. Now let's proceed to the next one. You can see the next example, even numbers, for instance. So you can group, you can collect you can group numbers together or group items together, and you save it in a single variable. That is known as what? List. So let's look at the next phase now. So how can we assess the element of a list? How can we assess it? So let me clarify the meaning of index. When we say we are assessing the element of a list, because there are several elements inside, there are several items inside. So we want to assess those elements. Like okay, let me assess the 4th element or 4th items there. Okay, I want to assess the 5th item there or the 1st item there. First of all, there's what is called index of an element. Like I'm talking about the position of an element in a list. The position. So in computing, the first position is known as position 0. I want to take note of that, position 0. You must start counting from 1. You say position 1. But in computing, we start counting from position 0. So that is what I want you to take note of right now. So examples, looking at fruit, for instance, that same example I've given before, which is fruit. So the element in the first position of the list is what? You write it like fruit 0. So position 0. So the element is what? Or the item is orange. Take note of that. So what of fruit 1 for position 1 is cherry. So what of position 2 is apple. So it's quite clear. So what is position 3? So I'll leave you to that. Maybe you can put it on the comment section, just from all I've explained, so you should be able to guess it, right? Okay, so let's move to the next session now. So there are others there. For instance, you have this. So the index of the last element, or if you want to look for the last element in Python, is -1, the last element, which is what? Carrot. Is that clear now? Just carrot. So the second to the last element of the list is what? -2. That is -1. You start counting from the last, then -2 is second to the last. Is that clear now? Okay, so that is it. Now let's proceed So now let me quickly talk about how can we change item of a list. Want to change the item? Oh, there are, the first item is orange or so, then you want to change it to mango, for instance. So you will write it like this: position 0. You can see position 0 right now, and you equate it, you assign mango to that position 0. That equality sign is assignment operator. That is used to assign a value to a particular list, like you assign a value to a variable. So in this case now, position 0 now, I said let it now be mango. So in this case, if you print the entire list out, you will have something like this: mango, cherry, apple, banana, like that, watermelon, carrots. Exactly. Now if you want to slice a list, what is the meaning of slicing? You slice just like you're cooking in the kitchen. Now you want to slice, you want to chunk or break into pieces a particular component or a particular food item, like onions, pepper. You break them to pieces. So that is how we can also do that to a list. This list is a collection, it's a group of elements, so we want to break it down. So that's what is known as slicing. Exactly. So slicing a list is crafting out a section of the list. For instance, you have fruits. So you have this one right now, this previous example I've used now. So we might want to single out the first 3 elements. The first 3 elements will be position 0, 1, and 2. So this is how we write it. It means that between 0 and 3, but 3 is not included. You understand? That is how Python sees it. Between 0 and 3. So it's going to include what? 0, 1, 2. So if it's between 0 and 3, this is how you write it. Fruit position between 0 and 3. But the 3 index 3 will not be there. So it's going to stop at 2. That is 0, 1, 2. The last one will not be there. That's how Python sees it. So what of the first 4 items is going to be between 0 to position 4, but 4 will not be included. So between the second and the 5th element will be what? Between, which is 1 to 5, it will be what? That means you will not include 5, but it's going to be between 0, 1, and 5. Just like in Excel, you put column. Column means range between one place or one starting point to the other. Okay, so that is how we list in Python is. So we continue with the list now. Let's look at the other stuff here. From the first item to include the last item, this is another way of writing it. So this one, you start from position 0. So if you don't put anything at the end, it means that from 0 to the end. So from the beginning to the last, to exclude the previous, to exclude the last element. Any element you put after the column, you are excluding the last element. Okay, so in this case now, sorry, this is a mistake here. So in this case now, it's going to include from beginning to the end, but -1 will not be included, position -1 will not be included, which is the last element. So from the beginning to the last, in this case, means you write it like, you can write it like this. So from beginning to the last. So when you just put column, it means from beginning to the last. So from the second to the last, means position 1, which is the second item, to the last. So is that clear right now? So let me quickly look at the last aspect of this lecture right now. So the last aspect is the length of a list. So the length of the list is the total number of total number of items in a list. The length of the list is the total number of items in a list. So we use the function len, L-E-N. So you put bracket, open bracket, close. Now, if you are writing like this, for instance, this fruit, which includes this all this item here, the length of the list will be, if you say length of fruit, that is the length of fruit, that's the meaning. So the answer will be what? 6. Is that clear right now? Okay, so let's look at the practicals. Let me do it. Let me do the practicals for you so that you have a feel of what it is. So let's jump to the next class for the practicals.